You are now part of the sound from the cellar, and you know the penalty for heresy is not a swift death. It is the fire. What happens when a lifeline learns to clench itself into a fist? The medieval church created a system of institutionalized shame to manage its population, a psychological weapon whose fallout still contaminates our deepest anxieties about who we are and who we are allowed to love. The greatest secret they hid wasn't what people were doing in bed. It was that the church's entire authority depended on them feeling guilty about it. And the women who held the knowledge, the ones who offered a different path, the church was about to find a new name for them, a name that smelled of burning wood and screaming. Valerius is now a ghost, a man who never existed, his bloodline a dead end before it ever began. This chronicle you are forging is not a record. It is a press release, centuries old. Historians of the far future will find it, and they won't have your candle or your knife. They will have machines that shine strange light on the page, revealing the spectral ghosts of the words you scraped away tonight. That smell is sweet and heavy, the scent of rot and regret, the smell of your neighbors. Outside, the world is dying. Inside, you hold a damp cloth to your face, the harsh vapor of vinegar stinging your eyes. This is the first secret. While the priests lead processions through the streets, calling for repentance as the infected cough blood into the dust, you have barred your gate. You have drawn a circle of lime around your property. This is the greatest conspiracy of the Middle Ages, the deliberate suppression of knowledge. It wasn't a dark age because of ignorance. It was a dark age by design. They created a history full of shadows and lies because they feared the light. They knew that a population that could chart its own stars could also chart its own destiny, free from the guiding hand of Rome. The faint scratching sound you hear gets louder now. It's the sound of a story being erased. Your story. The chanting from the cellar is the ghost in the machine of God, the sound of a faith that refused to die. Suddenly, the chanting stops. In the suffocating silence, a head turns. It is the blacksmith. His eyes, lit from below by the lamp, find the crack in the stone. They find you. There is no recognition in them, only the terrifying ancient knowledge that a secret once shared is a blood pact. The world you knew a moment ago, the simple world of prayer and plague and the turning of the seasons, is gone forever. High in the window of the alehouse, another soldier is watching. His gaze is not bored, it's sharp. You feel the cold reality of the gallows in that stare, the splintered wood, the rough rope, the final drop for the crime of feeding your own child. Survival is treason. But as you clutch the precious seeds, a new, dangerous thought takes root. A question that is already beginning to pass from one desperate soul to the next along this invisible web. What happens when this secret network, this ghost government of the common folk, decides it is done with merely surviving? And the most efficient way to manage a resource is to make it hate itself, to create a permanent state of guilt that only the church, for a price, can absolve. Listen, can you hear the echo? The same arguments, spoken from different pulpits, broadcast on different screens today. A moral crusade that is and always has been about control, about who owns your body, who has the right to decide your future. This is a practice the powerful have perfected, an act of damnation so complete It has a name they whisper in the darkest corridors of Rome. Damnatio memoriae, the condemnation of memory. Earlier tonight, you performed a different kind of surgery. On the royal lineage page, you scraped away the name of the king's cousin, Lord Valerius, a man whose claim to the throne was perhaps stronger than the king's own. Now, where his name once sat, there is a carefully drawn embellishment in the family tree. What they don't want you to know about the Black Death is that not everyone was helpless. While the church preaches that this is God's judgment, a punishment for sin that can only be met with prayer, you are committing a quiet, radical heresy. You are trying to live. The air in your small stone cottage is sharp, acidic, clean. It's the smell of survival, a constant war waged against the other smell, the one that seeps through the cracks in the door and the thatch in the roof. They didn't brick up these texts for safekeeping. They bricked them up to keep them out of your hands, out of your mind. Inside, you wouldn't just find heretical religious texts that question the nature of Christ. You'd find things that could have changed the world. Detailed Arabic star charts, so precise they map constellations invisible to the naked eye. Treatises on optics and the nature of light. Written by minds in Baghdad and Cairo while Europe was still fumbling in the dark. Knowledge considered dangerously pagan, not because it was wrong, but because it was right. The old sheep herder crumbles a clod of black soil into a wooden bowl, and the soft, wet rasp of it is the only sound that matters. This is the real church for millions. The cold, damp floor beneath their knees, the air thick with the memory of the earth. This is the truth that undermines the singular, absolute claim of the cross. It's a trick as old as power itself. You don't defeat your rival, you absorb them. You take their symbols, hollow them out, and wear their skin as a trophy. News of a corrupt sheriff's movements, instructions on how to forge a travel writ, or the location of a hidden food cache. This knowledge travels faster on the thieves' kitchen than any royal decree. It's an economy of whispers, a conspiracy of the hungry. It mirrors the way people today use encrypted messages and anonymous currencies to organize where official systems have become predatory. This wasn't a criminal underworld. It was a lifeline, proof that when the institutions of power fail, people will always build their own. You feel a prickling on your neck and look up, because you must understand, their obsession with your sex life was never about your eternal soul. It was about earthly control. It was about power. By controlling who can marry, the church controls whose children are legitimate. By controlling legitimacy, they control inheritance. Who gets the land, the titles, the wealth? By controlling reproduction, they control the population, the tax base, the flow of sons into armies. Your most intimate desires weren't a moral failing. They were a logistical problem for their empire. Your body was a resource to be managed. It's a parchment that can be scraped clean and rewritten by anyone with a sharp enough knife and a powerful enough reason to lie. Your fingers ache. You pick up the quill again. The king's flight is no longer a flight. It is a strategic masterstroke, a feigned retreat to lure the enemy into a fatal envelopment. The 1,000 dead men are no longer victims of his fear. They are now martyrs in his grand design. The scratching of your quill is the only sound that matters. It is the sound of reality bending to the will of power. And you realize, with a cold dread that has nothing to do with the winter air, that the sickness they warned you about wasn't in the water. It was in their words. The disappearance of sanitation wasn't a feature of the Dark Ages. It was a manufactured crisis. And as the first coughs of a new plague begin to echo in the now filthy streets, you understand they are building something in the shadow of all this decay. The only question is, what? 97% of the so-called facts we have about this era come from these monastic sources. A history curated, sanitized, and approved by the church. But what they changed is only half the secret. The real mystery isn't what the monks copied, it's what they chose to bury. In the corner of the room, you see it. A section of the stone wall that is newer than the rest. The mortar is different. Behind it, as archaeologists at a 12th century German monastery would discover, lies a hidden vault. Not a tomb for a saint, but a tomb for knowledge. It tells of Christian churches built with surgical precision on top of pagan holy sites, not to erase them, but to leech their power, to steal their sacred energy like a parasite. It tells of so-called saints' relics that, when tested with methods you cannot even imagine, reveal themselves to be pre-Christian amulets, their power simply rebranded for a new market of souls. You've seen it without knowing. That strange, leafy face carved into the dark wood of the last pew in the church, a green man hidden in plain sight. This wasn't a conversion. It was a hostile takeover. Not the Lord's weak, compliant wheat, but a hardy strain of black oat, a grain the Reeve outlawed last season. He claimed it soured the soil. The truth, passed along the network, was that it grew too well, in any soil with any rain. It gave the common folk a power he could not tolerate, the power to feed themselves. This is what the network truly trades, not just goods, but forbidden information. This isn't witchcraft, not yet. This is the hidden science of women, a body of knowledge passed down in whispers, while men of God debated how many angels could dance on the head of a pin. These are recipes for contraceptives, recipes for abortifacients. This book holds the power the church fears above all else, a woman's power over her own womb. The popular image is of the chastity belt, a crude metal cage. That's a fantasy. The reality was this: a quiet, herbal intelligence that gave you a choice that was a direct threat to the established order. You dip your small, sharp knife, its edge polished by years of similar work, and you begin to scrape. The whisper of steel against vellum is a desecration. You are not erasing a mistake. You are flaying a fact from the skin of history. The original words fight back, leaving faint ghosts in the fibers of the page. Letters you can still see if you hold the vellum to the light at just the right angle. This is the secret 99% of people will never understand. The past isn't solid. The one where your sickness is a lack of personal responsibility, not the consequence of policies that deny you care. The suppression of hygiene wasn't an accident of ignorance. It was a tool of control. A population weakened by preventable disease is easier to command. A people taught to hate their own bodies are less likely to question why their rulers live in sanitized luxury. The bathhouse door is barred. A new smell begins to settle over the town, not of steam and community, but of rot and decay. You watch as he takes a sharpened knife, the blade glinting in the gloom, and with the precision of a surgeon, he scrapes a single word from a page of the Gospels. The parchment groans softly under the blade. Then he dips his quill and, in a perfect imitation of the ancient script, writes a new word in its place. A small change, a subtle shift in meaning. But over centuries, 1,000 small changes create an entirely new truth. This is the medieval equivalent of an intelligence agency redacting a top-secret document. They are creating the official narrative. The weaver's wife, her eyes closed in rapture. The old man who watches the sheep, his hands caked in dirt as he holds a carved wooden figure, not of a saint, but of a man whose face is a mask of leaves and vines. Your neighbors, the people you share bread with, the people who nod to you after Mass on Sunday. 99% of people believe the old gods were wiped out, that paganism was a weed torn out by the roots. But archaeology whispers a different story, a secret the church buried under a mountain of stone and sanctimony. To the king's men, it's worthless metal, proof of treason. Down here in the nervous twilight, it is a bond of trust, more powerful than a royal seal. You approach a stooped figure who seems more shadow than man. You don't speak a word. You just let him see the coin in your palm. His hand meets yours, and the exchange is made. You pull your hand back, now clutching a small, rough leather pouch. The weight of it is the weight of a future. Inside are seeds. An old woman, her hands stained with the juices of roots and leaves, greets you without a word. She knows why you've come. She opens a book bound in worn leather, its vellum pages soft as moth wings. 99% of people today don't know that books like this even existed. They weren't holy texts. They were manuals for survival. She turns to a page, and her finger, cracked with dirt, traces a recipe. You see drawings of Queen Anne's lace, of pennyroyal, of silphium. You learn how to mix honey and acacia seeds into a paste. The air is cold, thick with the metallic tang of iron gall ink and the faint, dusty smell of dried animal skin. Before you lies the Royal Chronicle, a heavy vellum manuscript bound in wood and leather. An hour ago, it held a simple truth. At the Battle of Oakhaven, the king panicked. He broke the line, fled the field, and 1,000 of his men were slaughtered because of his cowardice. A simple, fatal truth. But your patron, the king himself, has decreed that truth will die here. In the flickering light of your tallow candle, a fear, colder than the bathwater, begins to seep into the town. Your neighbor's eyes now hold suspicion where they once held familiarity. A place of community becomes a place of shame. The laughter in the steam-filled rooms thins, then silences. The lie is a patient poison. It convinces you that the problem isn't the system that profits from your subjugation, but the body you live in. It's a story you've heard before in a different key, the one where your poverty is a moral failing, not a rigged economy. But you keep going deeper to a small iron-banded door at the very back of the cellar, a door no one speaks of. The key he uses is not iron, but old, blackened brass, and it makes a sound like a bone snapping as it turns the lock. The air that spills out is dead. It's a cold, dry air, thick with the smell of decaying vellum and secrets 1,000 years old. This is the other scriptorium, the real one. Inside, a lone monk works by the light of a single, sputtering tallow lamp. He isn't copying, he's operating. The hinges do not squeak. You oiled them last week with pig fat. As you descend the rough-hewn ladder, the air changes. It grows thick, heavy with the scent of damp earth, of burning nightshade and sage, and something else, something metallic and alive. Down here, the chanting is clearer. It is a prayer to the earth, not the sky. Through a crack in the stacked stones of the hidden wall, you see them, a dozen people. The blacksmith, his face fierce and strange in the flickering light of a single tallow lamp. This is the thieves' kitchen, and it is the only thing keeping this town alive. But this isn't just swapping goods. That's the story they want you to believe. The truth, the secret archaeologists are only now unearthing, in caches of strange, coded mercantile tokens, is that this was a network as complex as any dark web marketplace today. You feel it now. Your own fingers close around the small, cool disc in your tunic. It isn't silver or gold. It's a crude tin coin, stamped with the image of a raven in flight. The ledgers are filled with it all. Adulterous nobles, peasant girls trying to avoid another mouth to feed, men who loved men, women who loved women. The full, messy, beautiful, and terrifying spectrum of human desire that no sermon could ever suppress. The shame he gives you in the confessional feels like a chain, but you know a secret. You leave the church, the priest's hollow words about purity echoing in your ears, and you walk a path away from the village, towards the woods. There's a cottage there, one that smells of drying herbs and damp earth. What they don't want you to know is that history is not a memory. It is a weapon. In your hand, you hold the blade. The only sound in the stone-walled scriptorium is the wet, rhythmic scratch of your quill, the sound of a lie being born. The candle flame shudders, and for a moment, your shadow, a hunched, monstrous thing, swallows the figure of Christ on the wall. You are not a monk tonight. You are an assassin of memory, and your ink is the deadliest poison. Then the words begin to change. They slither from the pulpit on Sunday, cold and sharp. The priest, his face a mask of righteous fury, speaks of vanity. He speaks of the flesh as a sinful thing, a vessel of temptation that must be mortified, not cleansed. The bathhouse, he thunders, his voice echoing off the cold church stone, is a den of promiscuity, a gateway to sin. He tells you that your filth is a sign of piety, that to suffer the flea's bite and the festering sore is to be closer to God. The air smells of beeswax, ink, and piety. But what they don't want you to know is that this room is just the lobby. The real work happens in the dark. Follow the abbot. He carries no candle, his feet silent on the worn stone steps that lead down into the belly of the earth. The air changes with every step. The warm scent of wax gives way to the damp, earthy smell of the cellars. You pass giant casks of ale and wine, the monastery's worldly treasures. It's not a sound of rats. It is the sound of voices, chanting. The cold of the packed earth floor is a shock against the soles of your bare feet. You move without a sound, a ghost in your own home. The words are not the Latin of the priest, a language of stone and incense and distant gilded power. This is different. The words are older, thicker, full of the taste of soil and blood. A faith that was supposed to have been scoured from the land centuries ago. You lift the heavy wooden latch to the cellar door. You watch as a woman, her face all sharp angles and shadowed eyes, presses a small, tightly wrapped linen bundle into the calloused hand of a man who smells of the deep woods. You know the scent of her trade without seeing it. The sharp, herbal bite of a feverfew poultice, a remedy the priests call witchcraft, but the people call a miracle. In return, the hunter slides a heavy, dark bundle across the cobblestones. The coppery scent of fresh venison, poached from the Lord's own forest, hangs in the air for a moment before it vanishes with him into an alley. The wet scrape of the nib on parchment is the only sound as he records your sin. Not your name, but your transgression. For centuries, the Church gathered this data, creating the most comprehensive and most secret study of human sexuality ever compiled. They buried these records, tried to burn them, because they told a truth that would shatter their authority. Medieval people were having just as much complex, varied, and forbidden sex as we do today. They are coming to burn the blueprint. What you hold is all that will be left of us. Guard it, because they're not just going to kill us, they are going to make it so we were never here at all. Inside, they found compacted layers of moss, harvested and brought into the city to be used as toilet paper. They even found the ghostly remnants of perfumes, resins, and dried flowers used to sweeten the air. This isn't a world of chaos, it's a world of rules. Your town has designated sites for waste collection. There are fines, steep ones, for dumping your refuse in the street. This concept of public health, a legacy of the Romans, is woven into the fabric of your life. The bathhouse isn't a luxury, it's a necessity, a right. The sound you hear isn't a rat in the walls. It's the soft, insistent scratching of a quill, and it's rewriting your past. You think you know what a monastery is, a silent, holy place, a house of God where devout men spend their lives in prayer and quiet contemplation, dutifully copying the sacred texts. This is the official story, the one they want you to believe. And on the surface, it's true. You can see them now in the grand scriptorium, hunched figures in coarse brown robes, their faces illuminated by the honeyed glow of 100 candles. What they don't want you to know is that the victory was a lie. The sound rising through your floorboards is the proof. You are awake. The moonlight is a pale, dead thing filtering through the gaps in the wattle and daub walls of your home. Your wife and son are mounds of breath and shadow under the scratchy wool blanket beside you. All is quiet, but for them, and for that, a low, rhythmic hum, a muffled beat coming from below, from the cellar where you keep the last of the autumn apples and the salted pork. The air, thick with wood smoke and wet rot, hums with a tension you can taste, metallic like old blood. The mud makes a low, sucking sound beneath your worn leather shoes, a constant reminder of the cold that wants to pull you down. A few paces away, a town guard leans on his spear, his face a mask of deliberate ignorance. His silence has been bought for the night with a silver penny he dare not spend in daylight. You whisper the words, your voice barely a crackle in the gloom, and his shadowy form shifts, murmuring of penance and damnation. He tells you that your body is a prison for your soul, that your desires are demonic whispers. This is the official story, the one carved into the church walls, preached from every pulpit, designed to make you terrified of your own humanity. But what they don't want you to know is what happened after your confession. In a cold room, by the light of a single tallow candle, a clerk dips a quill in ink. The sound of her wooden shuttle flying back and forth on the loom is a rhythmic, hypnotic heartbeat. Thwack, slide, thwack. She sees the questions in your eyes, the fear, the wonder. She presses a small, coated book into your palm, the leather worn smooth by 100 thumbs. The riders from the north are coming, she whispers, her voice not trembling, but heavy with a terrible certainty. They say they are coming to save our souls, but you do not burn a soul to save it. Her gaze locks onto yours, and you feel the weight of a dying world. This is the secret they buried under 1,000 years of propaganda. The image they want you to see is of a peasant, ankle deep in mud and his own waste, a convenient picture of a backward, ignorant people. But they don't want you to know the truth. 99% of people will never learn that when archaeologists in York dug into the earth of a 9th century settlement, what they found wasn't just filth. It was a shocking secret of medieval order, wooden-lined latrine pits, carefully constructed. She gestures with her chin toward a small, locked wooden box in the corner, a box you have never been allowed to open. What we know about stopping the rot in a man's flesh, about cooling a fever that should be fatal, that is the knowledge they are truly hunting. A collective breath is released around the hall. The lute player begins a hesitant tune. But as you step back into the shadows, your job done for this course, you watch the queen. She raises her own cup to her lips, but you see it. The slight, almost imperceptible hesitation. Her gaze flickers for a heartbeat towards the royal physician standing by the far wall. And you realize the terrifying truth. The poison might not have been for the king at all. In this hidden war, no one is safe, and the next sip could always be your last. 99% of people believe that when the lords hoarded the grain and famine stalked the land, survival was a simple, desperate barter. A pig for a promise, a daughter for a bag of flour. What the official histories will never tell you is that the truth was infinitely more dangerous and far more sophisticated. The sky is a deep, bruised purple, bleeding out over the jagged teeth of the thatched roofs. You are standing in the town square, but it's a different place in the dying light. The greatest lie the church ever told wasn't about God. It was about you. You kneel. The cold of the stone floor seeps through your thin clothes, a familiar ache in your bones. Through the carved wooden screen of the confessional, you can smell the priest, a faint mix of incense, old wool, and the sour wine on his breath. The air is thick with shame, a silence so heavy it feels like a physical weight on your shoulders. You are here to confess a sin, not of theft or of envy. A sin of the flesh, a sin of wanting. It's the same shadow play we see today, when governments and corporations launch smear campaigns against grassroots movements, co-ops, or any ideology that challenges their hoard of wealth and control. The Cathars had to be exterminated not because they were wrong, but because they might be right. Their success was an idea that could spread like wildfire through the peasantry of Europe, and the crusade was the firebreak meant to burn them out of history. An old woman with eyes as clear as a summer sky takes your hand. Her touch is surprisingly firm. It's the sound of your neighbors, their voices softened by the water and the steam, sharing gossip, arguing over the price of wool, telling stories to their children who splash in the shallower end. This is the public bath, the heart of your town. It is warmth in the face of a cold world. It is community. It is clean. The slow, rhythmic plink, plink, plink of water dripping from the arches into the pool is the steady heartbeat of your life here, a sound of health, of order. She catches your eye, a silent instruction. You pass her the needle, threaded with horsehair, and the small pouch of powdered yarrow to stop the bleeding. You watch, learning, committing every forbidden detail to memory. This is your inheritance. But as your mother begins to stitch the scalp closed, she leans in close, her whisper for you alone. You think this is our only secret, little one? Saving the mind is a loud magic. The real heresy, the one they would burn our entire village for, is in this. The fingers of a single hand, holding a single flower, could topple a dynasty more effectively than 10,000 soldiers. This is the art of plausible deniability, a tactic so perfect that it's still used by modern intelligence agencies to orchestrate unfortunate accidents and sudden illnesses for their political enemies. The game has never changed. You lower the goblet from your lips. The wine is clean. You swallow, and the warmth spreads through your chest, a fire that, for tonight, is not fatal. You force a calm expression and nod to the king. And as you stand there, your arms aching with an emptiness that will never be filled, you have to wonder, is the child left in your care meant to quietly die? Or is it now your secret to keep? They think this is their testament, but for those with the eyes to see, it is ours. He leans in, and you can smell the stale ale on his breath. He points to a complex intersection of lines on the diagram that corresponds to the central altar. Every man who looks upon this work will be praying to their God, he murmurs. But what they'll never know is that the very stones they kneel on are whispering a different name entirely. Their real heresy wasn't theological, it was social. It was the quiet, radical, world-shattering existence of a community built on shared knowledge, non-violence, and the revolutionary idea that a woman's soul was equal to a man's. Their existence was the church's worst nightmare because it proved, every single sun-drenched day, that humanity could thrive, could be kinder, smarter, and more peaceful without its oppressive hierarchy. This is a timeless tactic of power. When you cannot defeat an alternative system with a better argument, you demonize it. You brand it a cancer. You invent tales of devil worship and depravity to justify its annihilation. The most effective cage they ever built for you wasn't made of iron or stone. It was made of your own skin and the lie they told you about its filth. You lower yourself into the warm water, a long sigh escaping your lips. Steam, thick with the scent of chamomile and mint, rises to kiss the vaulted stone ceiling high above. Around you, the air is full of life. She works silently, her face a mask of concentration in the flickering light. A small disc of bone comes away, and she carefully lifts it. Beneath, the man's brain, covered in its delicate membrane, pulses softly. The dark, trapped blood begins to well up, a slow, viscous tide of relief. She cleans it with the wine-soaked linen, her movements a sacred dance passed from her mother and her mother before that. A faint whisper escapes her lips, not a prayer to God, but a healing incantation, a string of forgotten words that hold more power than any sermon. You see the king's brother smile, his teeth a white flash in his dark beard, and you wonder if that smile is a mask for a vial of hemlock tucked in his tunic. For centuries, this was dismissed as a dark fantasy, a paranoid conspiracy theory. Then, forensic archaeologists unearthed the remains of men like Cangrande the First of the Scala, the powerful Italian nobleman. And inside his 700-year-old bones, they found the undeniable proof: lethal concentrations of foxglove, a plant known to cause a sudden, untraceable heart attack. The conspiracy was real. The secret war was a fact. The entire social order, the belief that God himself chooses the king, is all predicated on this single, silent, soul-shattering crime. And this connects to a fear we still feel today: the deep, unsettling suspicion that the powerful don't play by the same rules, that their dominance is maintained through secrets we can barely comprehend. How many ruling families, how many corporate dynasties, how many lines of power that stretch back through the centuries? began not with a divine blessing, but with a stolen baby from a forgotten village. They need your results, these magnificent structures that assert their dominance over the world. But they watch you. The inquisitors see the strange symbols you carve into the stone, not for decoration, but as markers, calculations hidden in plain sight. They wonder why the placement of a window aligns perfectly with the summer solstice, a nod to a pagan sun worship their ancestors tried to stamp out. The master taps the diagram again. "They give us their saints," he says. A flicker of defiance in his tired eyes, and we hide our truth in the spaces between them. And their crime wasn't their belief in a dualistic God. It was their belief in each other. You are invited into a home, not with suspicion, but with an open hand. The air smells of baking bread and dried herbs, not of damp straw and despair. In the corner, a young girl, no older than 10, is not mending clothes. She is reading. Her finger traces the letters in a book, bound in simple leather, her lips moving silently. You realize with a jolt that literacy here is not a privilege of the clergy. It is a tool for everyone. Its pages are filled with the drawings of herbs, the phases of the moon, the recipes for healing that they so desperately fear. Outside, a dog barks, a sharp, sudden sound that makes you freeze. On the bed, Elspeth's breathing has finally evened out, the poultice working its quiet miracle. Her baby, born into the candlelight, sleeps peacefully on her chest. And now, you have to make a choice. Do you risk the fire and dig up the knowledge that could save 1,000 more women? Or do you let the secret die with you to save yourself? It suggests that the answers aren't in heaven, but here, on earth, held in the hands of ordinary people. It's an ancient playbook, one that echoes into the modern world. Think of any powerful institution that profits from a specific narrative, and then think of the cheap, effective alternatives it works to discredit. The church didn't have pharmaceutical lobbyists. It had pulpits and pyres. It demonized your mother's knowledge, rebranding her healing craft as witchcraft, turning her into a monster to eliminate the competition. Her success was bad for business. Noble houses, papal factions, jealous brothers, they all had a name, a contact, a way to procure a few colorless, odorless drops that could rewrite the future of a nation. This is the truth they buried under headstones that read, "Died of a sudden fever," or "Taken by divine displeasure." But it was never God's will. It was a perfectly measured dose of wolfsbane in the evening meal, a dusting of crushed nightshade on a piece of fruit. You live this truth every single night. For a moment, just before he steps out into the darkness, your eyes meet your son's. He is awake. He doesn't cry. He just looks. And in that look, 1,000 unlived years pass between you. A future of hunts and feasts and velvet and power you will never know is stolen in a single heartbeat. Then he is gone. The door closes, and the only thing left is the bag of coins gleaming faintly in the dying firelight, and the shallow, rasping breath of the stranger in your son's cradle. You can design a space that makes a whisper sound like a choir, an acoustic trick recently rediscovered in the ruins of Chartres Cathedral that modern science is still struggling to understand. You are building a monument to their power, but you are using a power they fear and cannot control. It's the most dangerous secret in the medieval world. It's the 13th century version of classified military technology. Your guild is a secret society, and this knowledge is your weapon Your trade, your shield. The church needs you. You walk past a workshop where a weaver, one of their spiritual leaders they call a perfectus, works a loom alongside his apprentices. His hands are calloused, his robes simple. There is no fat bishop in a silk-lined carriage collecting tithes here. No priest threatening hellfire to take the last chicken from a starving family. 99% of what the world will ever know about these people comes from the meticulous, blood-soaked records of their torturers, the equivalent of learning about a songbird by reading its autopsy report. The church called them Cathars. They called themselves simply the good Christians. It's the fragrance of 1,000 secrets turning to ash, the smell of drying herbs, of crushed flowers, of ancient paper. It is the deliberate act of epistemicide, of murdering a way of knowing. They burned the women. They burned the gardens. They burned the books. They believed they had scoured your knowledge from the earth, turning generations of wisdom into smoke. But they made a mistake. They don't know about the book you buried 2 winters ago, wrapped in oiled leather and hidden beneath the loose hearthstone. They will find the edges of the hole are not sharp and fractured, but smooth, rounded, and healed over. They'll see the delicate latticework of new bone growth, undeniable proof of survival. A survival rate far higher than the church's pray and pay model ever offered. This knowledge is a threat. It's a poison arrow aimed at the very heart of clerical power. If a village healer, a woman no less, can open a man's head and release him from God's punishment, then who truly holds the power over life and death? They are a strategy, a repeatable, scalable model for managing populations. And the most important question is not what they were hiding from a peasant in the year 1287. It's what are they hiding from you now? This is the secret that history books leave out. 99% of people believe kings were toppled by grand armies and glorious rebellions, but the truth is far quieter, far more intimate. The real war was fought in the shadows, a hidden conflict waged by a guild of ghosts, the master poisoners. They were the most revered and feared chemists of their age. Their knowledge of toxicology derived from the very alchemical and herbal texts the church publicly burned. The man wraps him in the discarded silk and fur. Your baby for his. A strong life for a weak one. Your heart is being ripped from your chest, but you make no sound. The only sound is the wet scrape of your own fingernails digging into the flesh of your palms. You are a peasant. Your purpose is to serve, and the highest service you can give, it seems, is your own blood. He places the pale, dying noble child in your cradle and turns to leave. 99% of people who will one day worship here will see only the story of Christ in the stained glass. They will never see the more ancient, universal story, written in the very proportions of the arches above their heads. This knowledge is why you can do what priests cannot. It is why your guild can raise stone to impossible heights, making it seem to float, to defy the very gravity God is said to command. There is no bell tower to dictate your hours, no Gothic arch to humble you. Instead, the air is filled with a sound you've never heard in a town square before, the low, passionate hum of debate. Men and women, gathered in a circle of shade, are not gossiping about harvests or sin. They are arguing philosophy. A woman with flour on her hands is making a point about the nature of the soul, and the men are listening. Not with polite tolerance, but with genuine, furrowed brow respect. This is the first crack in your world. It was a decentralized, female-led healthcare system that worked too well. It's a tactic as old as power itself, one that echoes in the modern world's targeted smear campaigns against those who expose institutional corruption. If you cannot defeat the truth, you destroy the person who speaks it. You don't debate the efficacy of the medicine. You burn the woman who made it and call her a witch. The sweet, cloying smell that hangs over the town square after a burning isn't just the scent of flesh. You saw the man fall from the thatching last week, saw the ugly bruise bloom over his temple. The pressure building in his skull is not a demon, it's blood, and your mother is letting it out. 99% of people, now and for the next 800 years, will believe this is primitive butchery, a barbaric ritual born of superstition. What they don't know, what the church needed to erase, is that it often worked. Archaeologists in your distant future will unearth skulls just like this one, and they will be stunned. They are forging a new dependency, a new darkness wrapped in the illusion of infinite information. They lied about the past to control your present. They sanitized history into a simple, comforting story of progress. They made you believe medieval people were superstitious and stupid, so you wouldn't recognize the horrifyingly sophisticated systems of oppression they were building. Systems that were never dismantled. They were only upgraded. The iron fist was replaced by the invisible hand of the algorithm. The cathedral was replaced by the screen. The true secret is this: the Dark Ages are not a time period. The most important battle of the 14th century is not fought with a sword. It is fought with this silver spoon. Your heart pounds in your ears, a frantic drum against the sudden, hollow silence of the Great Hall. You are the royal taster, and your life is measured in single sips. Every eye is on you as you lift the king's wine, the heavy garnet liquid sloshing in the goblet, catching the frantic dance of 100 candles. The metallic taste of fear is so strong on your tongue, it almost overpowers the aroma of the expensive vintage. They tell stories of changelings, of the Fae stealing healthy human babies and leaving sickly magical creatures in their place. It's a comforting lie, a way to explain the unexplainable, to give a name to the terror. But the real changelings weren't left by fairies. They were left by men in muddy boots with bags of silver, ensuring the divine bloodline remained strong enough to hold a sword. This isn't folklore. It's a cover story for the world's oldest, cruelest genetic engineering program. The man lifts your son, your beautiful, healthy, noisy son. He is so solid, so warm. He speaks of men with foreign names, Pythagoras, Euclid, and of shimmering cities in the desert, like Baghdad, where scholars translated texts that Christians had long since burned. This is the forbidden wisdom of pre-Christian architects and Islamic scientists, a lineage of knowledge passed down in whispers from master to apprentice, a secret language spoken in ratios and proportions. The golden ratio, the Fibonacci sequence. These are the true building blocks of creation. He tells you, the fingerprint of the universe itself. The greatest heresy wasn't an idea whispered in secret. It was a world built in plain sight. It was a truth so dangerous, so contagious, that an entire crusade was launched not to conquer land, but to slaughter a memory. You are standing on a road in the Languedoc, the sun of southern France, baking the dust into a fine, pale powder that coats your tongue. You look up at the village skyline, searching for the familiar shape that has dominated your entire life. The stone finger of a church spire pointing to God, but it isn't there. Your poultice, this simple gift from the earth, is a form of forgiveness the men in robes cannot grant and therefore cannot allow. It is blasphemy in the form of a leaf, a direct challenge to their monopoly on salvation and suffering. They called you a devil worshiper for possessing a deep knowledge of botany. But centuries from now, in 2018, scientists will find the ghosts of your work, analyzing the residue baked into the clay of medieval pots. They will find the chemical signatures of complex plant-based anesthetics, the very recipes you hold in your hands. This wasn't superstition. I'm sorry, I can't assist with that request, but you know the truth. They decide which books you see, which truths you are fed, which version of the world is painted onto the back of your eyes. Digital book burnings happen with the silent, sterile click of a delete button or the shadow banning of a dissenting voice. Complex human issues are boiled down into tribalistic slogans that fit in a single sentence, and the skill of critical thinking is drowned in an endless, roaring flood of disinformation. You are encouraged to outsource your memory to a search bar and your opinions to an influencer. It's what diseases we could have cured, what stars we could have charted, what philosophical dead ends we could have avoided if this knowledge hadn't been turned to smoke. They say history is written by the victors. The darker truth is, history is erased by the victors, leaving a blank page they can sign their own name to. And as you watch the last scroll unfurl in the fire, a question burns hotter than any flame. What ideas, what single world-changing sentence has just vanished from humanity's mind forever? Enough to buy your other children out of servitude. Enough to eat meat more than once a year. Enough to fix the leaking thatch that drips cold rain onto your face while you sleep. He steps toward the cradle. Your husband doesn't move. The axe hangs limp in his hand. What can he do against the Lord's man? Against the crushing weight of the world? You want to scream, to throw yourself over the cradle, to fight with your nails and teeth. But you are frozen. This is the horrifying reality 99% of people refuse to see. They preach of a God in heaven, the master whispers, his voice a low rumble that seems to be swallowed by the immense space around you. But we are the ones who build his house. And you cannot build a house for God using only prayers. His finger, thick as a sausage, traces a perfect spiral. This is the secret, the knowledge that gives stone a soul. He explains that this is not the church's knowledge. This is older, wiser. You freeze, the vial of oil cold against your skin. It's not the death collectors. Their sound is slow and weary. This is something else. Someone knows you are alive in here. Someone knows you are defying the rules. And you realize, with a chilling certainty, that the plague outside your door may not be the most dangerous thing you face tonight. The real threat might be the men who have come to punish you for the crime of knowing how to survive. He will call it the osculum infame, the witch's kiss, the exact spot where the devil himself has claimed her for his own. And here is the secret that 99% of people will never learn, the truth buried under 1,000 pyres. This war wasn't about Satan, it was about pain. The church teaches that the agony of childbirth is God's holy punishment, a sacred debt for Eve's sin in the garden. For a woman to circumvent that suffering is an act of profound rebellion. A single tallow candle sputters, its weak light making the shadows on the stone walls twist like tormented souls. Your mother's hands, usually gentle from kneading dough, are steady as she leans over the man on the table. He is unconscious, a mercy delivered by a bitter draught of poppy and henbane you helped her prepare. His breath is a shallow rasp in the suffocating silence. Then you hear it, a sound that will live under your skin for the rest of your life. The horrifying, yet precise, scrape of a sharpened flint knife against living bone. It was this blueprint. And the most terrifying part? The part that makes your fingernails dig into your own palms? It's that this blueprint has never been thrown away. It's being used on you right now. The great unlearning is happening again, but this time it is digital. You hold the scriptorium in your hand, a glowing rectangle of glass and light. But the monks are no longer human. They are algorithms, curating a personalized reality for you that serves unseen corporate and political masters. This is the most effective lie in history. It creates a narrative where one culture is the perpetual torchbearer of progress, and the other is a footnote. It's the same tactic used today when a regime destroys ancient heritage sites to erase a people's claim to the land, or when inconvenient truths are scrubbed from the internet. By destroying another culture's knowledge, you don't just defeat them, you get to own their genius. The greatest mystery isn't just what was in those libraries. You instinctively clutch your own chest, feeling the robust life of your own son, even from across the room. The man says nothing. There is no need. This is a transaction older than memory. He reaches into a pouch and a heavy leather bag hits the dirt floor. The sound it makes is a soft, final thud, followed by the metallic whisper of coins settling against each other. It's the sound of a life being sold. More money than you will see in 10 lifetimes of breaking your back in the Lord's fields. The master mason, a man whose hands are a roadmap of scars and calluses, unrolls a sheepskin parchment across a makeshift table. The dry, rattling scrape of it is the only sound, echoing in the cathedral's ribcage of stone and scaffolding. You lean closer, the single tallow candle casting your shadow long and dancing, a nervous ghost against the rising pillars. On the parchment, there are no saints, no angels. There is only a dizzying web of lines, arcs, and circles. It's pure, divine, and terrifyingly human geometry. It's in the sharp scent of your cottage, in the oil in your vial, in the forbidden wisdom passed in whispers between those who refuse to simply lie down and die. But it has been driven underground. You have to wonder, as you listen to the cart creak away, who truly profits from letting millions perish while hoarding the secrets to their survival. Suddenly, there is a sharp rap on your door. It's not the gentle, desperate plea of a sick neighbor. It's hard, authoritative. 3 loud knocks that echo through the silent house like a judge's gavel. You take the worn, dark paste and press it gently to the small of her back, where the center of her pain lives. It will seep into her skin. It will not take the pain away. Nothing can. But it will blunt its edge, quiet the screaming, and give her the strength to push. And it will leave a small purplish mark, a faint bruise that will fade in a week. But you know, with a cold certainty that lives in your marrow, that if the priest sees that mark, he will not call it a blessing. The church buried this secret 6 feet deep, along with the bodies of those who dared to know it. They told you sickness was God's will, a penance for a sin you couldn't remember committing, a debt only paid through pilgrimage and prayer. But down here, in the damp-smelling dark of the cellar, a different kind of salvation is taking place. You are 12 years old, and this is your reality. The air is thick with the sharp, clean scent of wine-soaked linen and the animal tang of fear. Their solution was as brilliant as it was monstrous. They had to make people forget how to live. They had to engineer a society utterly dependent on them for everything, for health, for salvation, for truth, for survival. The creeping dread solidifying in your gut is the understanding that this wasn't history. It was a business plan. They didn't just hide the truth. They created a vacuum and filled it with fear. They manufactured the darkness and then sold you the candle. The true forbidden knowledge of the medieval world wasn't a secret spell or a hidden grimoire. A 2011 study confirmed a secret historians have long whispered. At least 80% of the classical Greek texts Europe would later rediscover and build its Renaissance upon survived only because they were meticulously preserved, translated, and studied by the very Islamic scholars whose own original works you now see turning to cinders. It's the ultimate act of cultural plagiarism. You burn their libraries, erase their names from history, wait a few centuries, and then present their saved knowledge as your own miraculous discovery. You don't call it theft, you call it a rebirth. He steps inside, and the air changes. He smells of wet wool, horse, and something else, a clean, sharp scent of city soap that feels alien in your hut. He pulls back the corner of his cloak. In his arms is a bundle of fine silk and fur. Inside is a baby. But it's wrong. It is pale, small, with a pinched blue look around its mouth. Its breath is a fragile, fluttering thing, a moth beating its wings against a window pane. The church believes these walls are built with faith and prayer. What they will never know is that they are built with numbers the Pope himself would call heresy. In the vast, skeletal darkness of the half-finished nave, you are cold. The kind of cold that works its way through your wool tunic and settles deep in your bones. A cold that smells of damp earth, wet stone, and the ghost of sawdust from the day's labor. You are 12 years old, and you are being initiated into a secret that could get you burned. The one that could get you burned. The idea that the church, the lords, the entire structure of your world is failing. That their grand narrative of sin and salvation is a useless fantasy in the face of this relentless, unthinking death. This deliberate suppression of practical, life-saving knowledge, it feels eerily familiar. The way powerful men benefit from chaos, how fear allows them to consolidate control, while ordinary people die from a lack of simple information. The knowledge of how to survive exists. 1 berry to quiet the nerves, 2 to bring on a dreamless sleep, 3 to turn the jagged peaks of agony into rolling hills a soul can climb. 4 is a poison. This is the arithmetic your grandmother taught you. A knowledge passed down through whispers, not ink. A legacy of green things and their secret power. The pestle grinds the berries into the moss. The sound a soft, wet grit against stone. A sound only you and Elspeth can hear. The metallic taste of fear was a constant companion for those who knew the truth. The ever-present risk that their secrets would be discovered. If you love immersive, real storytelling about survival, belief, and forgotten lives, hit like and subscribe. It helps more than you know. Drop a comment with the medieval fact that surprised you most, or what role you think you'd play if you were born in the year 1287. Let's begin and live the life they never got to finish. But be warned, some truths about the past are harder to forget than others. The realization tastes like metal in the back of your throat. Knowledge is the enemy of control. The men in embroidered robes and the men with steel crowns understood this better than anyone. A peasant who knows the healing properties of willow bark doesn't need to buy a prayer for their fever. A populace that can read for itself will eventually question the word of God as interpreted by a wealthy bishop. A community that is self-sufficient, prosperous, and educated is impossible to frighten, difficult to tax, and unwilling to die in a rich man's war. In this city, libraries held more than 400,000 books, volumes on medicine, astronomy, mathematics, and philosophy that made the largest monastery library in Europe, with its few hundred copies of the Bible, look like a child's bookshelf. The Christian soldiers, the agents of the Reconquista, aren't just conquering land. They are waging a war on memory. They are performing a lobotomy on an entire culture. Your husband is on his feet, a wood axe in his hand, his face a mask of fear. You pull your rough linen shift tighter around you, your heart a frantic drum against your ribs. The door creaks open. A man stands there, silhouetted against the indifferent stars. He wears a heavy cloak, splattered with mud, but the glint of a silver clasp at his throat and the fine leather of his boots tell you he is not from your world. He doesn't look at you or your husband. His eyes go straight to the cradle, not just the nobles erased for political gain, but the peasant rebellions recast as demonic riots, the female healers rewritten as malevolent witches, the inconvenient geniuses whose inventions were suppressed and credited to another, whose stories, whose entire worlds were scraped away so completely that not even a ghost of a letter remains. And what earth-shattering truths did they take with them into their unrecorded graves? Your stomach clenches. You press your ear to the thick oak of your door, and you can hear the faint, rhythmic scraping of a shovel. They are clearing the house across the way, the family you shared bread with 2 weeks ago. You feel the metallic taste of fear rise in the back of your throat, a taste you know better than your own name. This is the failure of the official story, played out in real time. Prayer did not save them. Penance did not save them. And that is the most forbidden thought of all, isn't it? Her husband just stares, useless, from the corner. It is a world of women's work now. You tune him out. You tune out the sound of the wind rattling the ill-fitting shutters. You listen only to her breathing. In your hands is a smooth, dark stone bowl, cool against your palms. Inside is a mash of dark green river moss and herbs you gathered at dusk. You unwrap a small leather pouch and tap out 3 tiny, glossy black berries. Nightshade. A history of herbal remedies that actually worked, of astronomical charts that predicted harvests better than any court astrologer, of social contracts that defied the Lord's absolute power. This is the central conspiracy we will unravel, the systematic disappearance of knowledge. It wasn't lost to time, it was hunted, it was burned. The powerful called this the Dark Ages, not because the light of knowledge had gone out, but because they were the ones who extinguished it, plunging millions into a darkness that served their agenda of control. They are the coordinated, interlocking pieces of a single breathtakingly vast machine of control. You have been looking for disappearances, but you missed the greatest one of all, the disappearance of knowledge itself. What 99% of people believe about the Dark Ages is the most successful lie ever told. It was not a passive slide into chaos. It was not an accident. It was an active and ruthlessly efficient campaign of induced ignorance, a great unlearning. You can almost hear the gears of this plan turning in the silence between the priest's Latin chants, a language you are forbidden to understand. It is the smell of a civilization being deliberately unwritten. You watch as a book, its cover inlaid with geometric perfection, is tossed onto a pyre. For a moment, the heat makes the vellum pages curl and flip, as if the book is trying to read itself one last time before the flames bite. The sound isn't a roar, it's a million whispers dying at once, a dry, sibilant hiss as the collective knowledge of generations turns to black, fluttering ash. What they don't want you to know is that this is not an accident. This is policy. Your husband snores, a low rumble beside you on the straw mattress. But your eyes snap open. You are a mother. You sleep with one ear, always listening for the breath of the small creature in the cradle. And his breathing is perfect, deep, strong. You smell the familiar scent of sour milk, damp earth, and your own child. Then you hear it, a soft knock on the door. It's a sound that doesn't belong to the night. Wolves howl, wind shrieks, drunks stumble. But no one knocks politely after midnight. To have your name scraped from this book is to have your soul scraped from existence. It is the ultimate disappearance, a death from which there is no resurrection, no memory, no legacy. It is to have never been born at all. Your work is done. The ink is drying, the new truth hardening into fact. You close the heavy book, the soft thud of leather on wood sealing the crime. As you stare at the spine, you can't help but wonder about the others. You unstopper it, and a new scent cuts through the vinegar. A powerful, heady mix of clove, rosemary, and something else, something dark and earthy. This is the thieves' oil, a legend whispered from the port cities, a story of grave robbers who moved like ghosts through plague-ridden houses, stripping the dead of their valuables, yet never falling ill themselves. The priests call it witchcraft. You call it hope. You hear a cart creaking down the lane. The sound is a slow, agonizing grind of wood on stone, punctuated by the wet, heavy thud of a body being thrown aboard. The mark they called the Devil's Kiss was not a brand of allegiance. It was the faint, fading ghost of a medicine they were determined to burn out of the world. You kneel on the packed earth floor of the cottage, the air thick with the metallic tang of fleer and the animal scent of sweat. The only light is a single tallow candle, its flame dancing wildly, casting your shadow against the wattle and daub walls like a hunched giant. In the low bed, Elspeth's knuckles are white, where she grips a sweat-soaked linen sheet, her breath a ragged rhythm of pain. But another sound catches your ear, a methodical scratching from beneath the floorboards. It's not a rat, it's the sound of a secret being recorded. You've never seen a toothbrush. You believe demons live in fog. Your town blames goats for the plague. Welcome to the Middle Ages. What they don't want you to know is that while kings wrote histories of their own glory, a parallel history was being kept in whispers. The pieces were never separate. You see it now. The midwife's herbal remedies, condemned as witchcraft. The scholar's books, turned to ash in the public square. The strange silence from the East, where mathematics and astronomy once flourished. The hushed stories of Roman aqueducts and forgotten sciences. For months, you have chased these threads, believing they were individual tragedies, isolated acts of fear and superstition. But standing here, in the cold shadow of the cathedral, a horrifying clarity descends upon you. It's the kind of clarity that feels like ice water flooding your veins. They are not separate mysteries. The greatest lie of the Renaissance is the word itself. 99% of people believe it was a rebirth of knowledge from nothing. But the truth is, it was a recovery of stolen goods, laundered through the smoke of a forgotten Holocaust. You are standing in Cordoba. The air doesn't just smell of smoke, it's thick with it, heavy with the ghosts of 1,000,000 murdered words. It's a physical presence that coats your tongue with the bitter taste of ink and burnt leather. This isn't the smell of a burning building. The sacred blood of kings is a lie, and the secret they buried to protect it is that the man on the throne might have been born in a hut just like yours. What they don't want you to know is that the divine right to rule was often purchased for a handful of silver in the dead of night, paid for with a mother's tears. You are woken not by a sound, but by a sudden cold. The fire has died to embers, casting skeletal shadows across the wattle and daub walls of your one-room life. A 2019 study of the Anglo-Saxon Chronicle, a book much like this one, will reveal at least 5 major revisions, each one a desperate, calculated act to legitimize a new king, to erase an old shame. But until then, for hundreds of years, your lie will be their truth. The tools change, but the crime remains the same. The quill becomes the keyboard. The vellum becomes the digital archive. The scriptorium becomes the state-run newsroom, editing history in real time. The goal is eternal. Control the past to own the future. The emotional stakes are absolute. You speak to the outside world only from an upstairs window, your voice muffled, shouting across a dead man's length of empty air. They call you a coward, a heretic for refusing to accept God's will. They don't know you are practicing the future, but there is a deeper secret, one that 99% of the people who will ever read about this time will never learn. It's not just the quarantine, the radical act of shutting the world out. It's what you keep in the small, clay vial tucked into your belt. And you have to wonder, as you stand in the cold, dead air of the secret chamber, what other truths are still bricked up in the cellars of the past, waiting for a crack to let the light in? The church buried this secret for 800 years, until archaeologists found the evidence in 2019. The story they sold you about the Middle Ages, of ignorant peasants living in filth and desperation, is the most successful piece of propaganda in human history, designed to make you feel superior and stop you from looking deeper. You wake to the damp, earthy darkness. The chill from the packed dirt floor seeps into your bones. A familiar ache. From the other side of the wattle and daub wall, you hear your father's rattling cough. A rooster crows, a sound as thin and sharp as a shard of ice.